You're listening to Arcane Carolinas, an exploration of the Carolinas' folklore, legends, myths, and modern weird. Each episode, we examine the historical context of our topic and aim to preserve some of the stories that help make this part of the world such a fascinating place. Hey, it's Arcane Carolina time! Hello and welcome to another episode of Arcane Carolinas as part of our fall 2021 lineup. I'm your co-host, Charlie Mushaw.
I'm your co-host, award-winning novelist, Michael G. Williams. I feel like when I describe myself that way, it's like, I don't know, I've said that so many times, I kind of feel like it's a weird brag. I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm your co-host, Michael G. Williams. There you go. How's that?
It's whatever you want, man.
I don't know. I'm in a weird place because I was not prepared for this episode the way that I wanted to be.
Okay, you know what? Let's just, that's good. We'll go with regular old Michael G. Williams because today is about a completely universal experience that you don't need to be in a literary mindset to enjoy. This is about the open road. This is a little bit of a different one. This is purely modern weird, purely promoting local businesses, tentatively titled Road Trippin'. This is all about the weird stuff that you see on the side of the road. Before we get into that, I do want to say that if you are listening to this, consider giving us a rating and or review on the podcast service of your choice. We would really appreciate that. Lastly, thank you to our Patreon backers with whom we would not be able to do things like make the zine and the stickers and the buttons and all the giveaways for the fall that we're able to do this year. It's very exciting, and it is all thanks to the Patreon backers. Every dollar that we get through Patreon goes directly back in to building these shared experiences as a community, because that's how we feel about, who we get to share these stories with.
Yeah. Thank you very much. That really means a lot. It has made a lot of stuff possible that we had never even considered would be conceivable when we started this.
So, with all that said, road tripping. There you are. It's like hour 4 on a road trip, and you're going somewhere, and you're excited about the destination, but there's all this fun stuff that happens along the way. We're going to talk about some of our favorite roadside attractions today.
Definitely.
Something that I posted to the Instagram back in the spring on a trip to Georgia. I was going to Georgia, and I passed the Peachoid in Gaffney, South Carolina. And that's just such like a universal experience to get excited about seeing the Peachoid. The 135-foot tall water tower shaped like a peach along I-85.
I mean, like to the point that it shows up in a House of Cards,
Yeah, it is a cultural touchstone. It is sometimes referred to as the Peach, Mr. Peach, the moon over Gaffney, because it looks like a butt.
I didn't want to be the one who came out and said it, but it does totally look like a butt. There's just nothing. There's no way to get around it. You'd see it, especially if you're driving south on I-85. You see it and you're just like, oh, that's anatomical.
Yeah, so but it's great. It's got what's the restaurant right next to it? Fats, so you can stop and eat at Fats. And sit underneath the giant peach. It was built in 1981 by the Chicago Bridge and Iron Company of Steel and Concrete. As it was built in 81, I have never not known I-85 to not have the peach. There's probably some double negatives in there that I screwed up, but the point is,
I was going to say, I don't think that actually comes out in the wash.
I have always known the peach to be a part of the I-85 southbound experience, and I love it.
That is always one of the big hallmarks for us driving to Dragon Con every year is, there's the Peachoid.
Another South Carolina roadside thing that is not like as accessible. We covered this a little bit in the summer issue of the zine is the Bowman, South Carolina UFO Welcome Center.
Really want to hear about this. I'm really fascinated by this.
So the UFO Welcome Center was built by a fellow named Jody Pendarvis in 1994 as a place of diplomacy where aliens could land and meet Earthlings.
Have any of them landed there to our knowledge?
Mr. Pendarvis might be one himself. He might be the diplomat of whatever group of aliens. So,
But see, that would be a great cover, though, wouldn't it? If you
Sure.
were an alien and you wanted to cover up alien visitations, then what would you do? You would disguise yourself as a human, establish the official alien welcome center, and then nobody ever lands at it. And then you go, well, I guess they're not here.
it's pretty cool. It looks like something that I'm trying to choose my words because I don't want to sound negative, because I do think it's a fun thing, and it's the sort of thing that I enjoy seeing. It is not built by a skilled craftsman.
Okay.
It looks like, okay, so Pee-wee's Playhouse way back in the day, you know, it was just like all these different like chunks of stuff like built on, and like the exterior looked very disjointed.
Yeah, very busy.
Yes, that's what it looks like. It resembles a flying saucer that is held together from various materials and in various states of disrepair. You would not be wrong for thinking it was abandoned or a dilapidated art project if you happened upon it and weren't actively seeking it out. But dude is there. He like stays in it.
Wow.
Yeah. Apparently during the warmer months, he's got an air conditioning unit up in the top, and he that's his favorite spot. He likes to go up there and hang out and think about things and meditate on the possibility of aliens. And people are welcome to go and check it out.
I think that's fantastic. I have a deep and sincere, like a real like emotional love for, but also like a really deep intellectual appreciation for people who they know what their passion is and they just go for it.
It's pretty cool. It's like the type of folk art that you can really get behind because it's not contrived. Like this is genuinely something he's passionate about and wanted to do, and he did it.
Yeah. So do you want me to do one?
Yeah.
So one of mine is close to the state line in South Carolina. It's not in South Carolina. It's in North Carolina. It's in Calabash, North Carolina, on North Carolina Highway 179, just north of North Myrtle Beach. And it is called St. Knickknacks.
I've been there.
You've been there. Okay.
Yes.
It's funny to me how many people I know have been there, actually. It's so weird. I bet a bunch of people listening have been there too.
Yeah.
If you're not familiar with St. Knickknacks, it is one section of a much larger store called Callahan's of Calabash. It's been there for over 40 years. St. Knickknacks is my favorite part of it. They imagine a Christmas store, like a year-round Christmas store, except that this one is the size of, I mean, it's so huge. It's like a Target-sized Christmas store inside an even larger beach store. They've got Christmas trees of every variety. They have hanging upside down Christmas trees. They have Christmas trees built around specific themes, countless themes. They also have a bunch of rooms full of Christmas stuff. One of the rooms is the room that we call the Doctor Who room because it is chock full of these figures who are designed to look as though they're singing, but they look like they're screaming. And I'm pretty sure that they're all people who fell victim to an alien in the cold open to a Doctor Who Christmas special. But they also have Easter room, they have Thanksgiving room, they have Halloween room. They have this Christmas ornament that I have to go seek out every time I'm there. And I was there like 3 weeks ago and I sought it out just to make sure that it's actually real. This is not a happy or positive thing to say, but it's supposed to look like a popcorn machine full of popcorn. And what it looks like is that it's full of bloody teeth. There's a lot of like unintentional humor in there, along with a bunch of like really well done Christmas displays and like exceptionally cool stuff. And like tucked away in corners here and there, there's stuff that kind of terrifies as well. And that's my favorite mix right there.
Yeah. If you're feeling festive in any capacity, they've got you covered.
Yeah. I've always kind of wanted to go at Christmas just to see if it's like totally dead, because in the middle of summer, people are just all about some St. Knickknacks, and people will drive a significant distance to go there. They also sell really good fudge, FYI.
Yeah, I think it was probably, I'm trying to think back because I remember the trip that I was on when I went. So that would have been spring of 2000.
Yeah.
Really long time ago. 20 years ago at this point, but it was there and it was a sight to see then.
Yeah.
So,
and it gets bigger and more complicated every year. And being there in May, there were multiple staff.
It gets bigger and more complicated every year, just like me.
And like there were staff there hanging up new kinds of decorations and stuff just like 3 weeks ago. It was pretty wild.
So speaking of things getting bigger and more complicated, there is an elephant in the room whenever you're talking roadside attractions in the Carolinas, and that is south of the border. You cannot talk about roadside attractions in the Carolinas without addressing south of the border.
I've never been there.
So we need to fix that. Like at some point we will be on our way to a convention or something, and we're going to stop and I'm going to make sure that you get the full experience.
Okay.
So south of the border is quite literally right on the border of North Carolina and South Carolina on I-95. It's exit 1.
Oh, wow.
It like rolls over when you change states.
Mm-hmm.
So south of the border, it has been there for 70 years. It is I don't know it's almost like a town at this point. It's like a Mexican themed town. So the way it started was in 1949, this dude, Alan Schaefer, built a beer stand 18 by 36 feet. So not
that's it.
Like a shed, like a brew through.
Yeah.
Basically, the dude builds a shed to sell beer in South Carolina. And what some people might not realize is that the interstate system did not exist at that point. So he just set it up next to a local highway. It was like a local route. And this was the local beer stand. Called it South of the Border Beer Depot. So they did okay, and they added a grill. And we're like, oh, let's make some food. So we started selling a little bit of food, right? There were 10 seats. There were 10 seats at his restaurant. Modest beginning, and sold some beer. Went well enough that he was like, well, start selling some food. That went well. Said, yeah, let's do a motel. Built a 20-room motel on the site, and the shipping label was for Schaefer Project south of the North Carolina border. So like the bill of goods.
Yeah.
That was the whole thing. Then he realized that Schaefer's south of the North Carolina border should probably get shortened. So all of it got rebranded as south of the border. So the beer stand, the grill, the 20-room motel, all of it is called south of the border. And he said, okay, well, I got a theme now. So he went to Mexico. So he traveled to Mexico because he was like, well, I'm going to need items for my gift shop. So he went to Mexico to get authentic Mexican goods for his Mexican themed highway side stop. And he met some people down there, and 2 young men that were like, oh, we'll be your people. He was like, great. He actually went as far as to help them get their paperwork and get them into the United States. So he got them into the States, and they were his Mexican liaisons. They also worked at the motel in the office, and he began importing trinkets and tchotchkes and kitsch items. It was very tongue in cheek. Amazing 1950s roadside attraction with all the amazing, just like, check it out, we got a giant sombrero, do you want to buy it? Like that. Like all the stuff that they still try to sell you in Mexico if you go there now.
Okay. Yeah.
Which I enjoy that stuff. So
there you go.
The site itself, it began to expand. They added a cocktail lounge, as was the style, a gas station. As you can see, it's become its own thing. Then in 1962, the magic happened, and they decided to start selling fireworks.
Oh my God. Yeah. That's wow.
Because fireworks are illegal in North Carolina.
Yeah. I mean, like you can buy some of them here.
Yeah. You can get like the little fountains. But
yeah, but like back in the day, you had to go across the state line to get anything.
And that is how I know of south of the border. I knew of it as a fireworks stop along 95. So they started doing that. And then in 1964, what really changed everything, and this, I don't think people necessarily appreciate how the interstate system shaped the United States on multiple levels. In 1964, it's announced that the route for I-95 will pass by south of the border. It's not an eminent domain and it can remain, and they're going to build around it. Mm-hmm. And it just economically exploded. They added a barbershop, a drugstore, a variety store. They had their own post office at one point. Go-kart tracks, full outdoor recreational facilities. It's like the Mexican theme to Disney at this point. Like the whole theme is just Mexico and our not particularly well-informed interpretation of it.
I was going to say, is it more like Mexico or is it more like our idea of Mexico?
It is distinctly our idea of Mexico. Giant fiberglass people, giant fiberglass animals, a tiny zoo with like, oh, you want to see some snakes and crocodiles and stuff like that? It's awesome. If you're into kitsch at all, south of the border is your spot. I'm done. I'm going to get off my south of the border soapbox. I understand that. I understand that it's ridiculous. I understand that it's kitschy. I get that. It's one of those old timey, like, how is this a thing type locations. It's a landmark.
Yeah. I mean, everybody knows where it is. Even if I've never been, I know exactly where it is. I've seen the sign many times.
So that is the nickel version of south of the border. If you need some fireworks, go to south of the border. If you need some beer, go to south of the border. Need a place to stay? South of the border. Want to play some arcade games? South of the border. Gas? South of the border. Food? South of the border. I just realized that I was gesturing wildly, and that's not going to translate to audio.
It was funny to watch, though. Do you want me to do one now?
Yeah, sure.
I'm going to do one it's very off the beaten path, and it's a weird little nugget of North Carolina history, but it's on a state highway, and you can go to it and look at it now. And it's the road to nowhere in Bryson City, North Carolina. Technically, it's in Swain County, not in Bryson City, but it's way up the mountain in far western North Carolina. In the 1920s, 1930s, the Tennessee Valley Authority built Fontana Dam and produced Fontana Lake. In the course of creating Fontana Lake, they flooded out a bunch of old towns that had been in those places and old communities. So they're like underwater towns and underwater communities under Fontana Lake. I mean, they're long gone, but in the course of that, they were careful to either move or to protect the burial grounds, the cemeteries that had been built by people in those communities. And they were supposed to build a road, an extension to an existing road, along the north edge of Fontana Lake in order to allow people to keep visiting those burial places. It started being promised in the 1930s. It was never done. And every federal administration since then has promised that it would do something about it and never did, until the Obama administration said, everybody knows this is not happening, so we're just going to pay the county back for this. And in fact, the Obama administration paid Swain County $52 million to say, hey, we're not building a road. Here's some money. Sorry. So they were the first people to actually try to at least provide some closure on this. And these days you can go to it and it's fascinating. I highly recommend that people look up some photos of this. You can park along the side of the highway. They have parking spaces that are marked about maybe 300 yards from the beginning of the end of the road to nowhere. And then you can walk up the road where cars are not allowed because there's nowhere for them to drive. And you walk around a little curve at the top of a hill, and there's a big arched entrance into a tunnel into the mountain. And that looks almost like a tunnel you'd see in a Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote cartoon, it has it's a stone faced and it's built into the side of the mountain. And you walk that and it's a couple of 100 yards. And then at the end of it, there's maybe 50 feet more road. And then the road just stops. It's just woods in front of you. And it's really fascinating. They just reached a point where they weren't going to keep building the road anymore. The official version is that this was for an environmental issue. Nobody, as far as I know, agrees on that or with that or knows what that environmental issue was. But
I'm tired of working in this environment.
Right. When I was a kid, the story was always that it was because there were people in Congress who controlled the funding of this highway project because it was a federal project. And as long as the road was not completed, they would be able to hunt there. And so they just kept killing the funding for another year so that they'd continue being able to use this as a place to hunt. I don't know if that's true. That's just the rumor that people would say when I was a kid. The reason I heard about it a bunch as a kid is because my father's family are among the people who were displaced by the creation of Fontana Lake. And so we would go every year and visit these old graveyards and decorate graves and see the homes of ancestors and folks like that in these places that are no longer accessible by road. And there would be a lot of people really spun up about like, oh, we're going to get the road finished one day. The road's never getting finished. I don't know what to say. Right. But you can go to the road to nowhere and walk it and see this like meticulously maintained road that just ends in trees and forest. And that's a really neat experience. And if you're related to, or you just want to see the old graveyards that it was supposed to connect to, or the old homes that are preserved, because all of the woods around Fontana Lake are national park land, the National Park Service still to this day, many, many decades later, runs a service every year where on specific days, they will ferry people on pontoon boats across the river from designated parking spaces and then put them on trucks and drive them to these graveyards and let people decorate graves and see their ancestors' homes and have a big picnic lunch and all kinds of stuff like that. And that is a really fascinating experience. And we did that at least once a year throughout my childhood and often 2 or 3 times a year.
I'm looking at the tunnel. It reminds me of Back to the Future. The tunnel from Back to the Future.
Yeah, very much so.
And I will say that when you were describing the road to nowhere before the tunnel, you go up the hill and then you fall off because the road just ends.
Yeah. It's interesting. The highway to get to where the road to nowhere is open to cars, even though it doesn't go anywhere. And you can just like drive along the edge of Fontana Lake. And it's so old that the guardrails are wooden. Mm-hmm. It's just interesting. It's beautiful. It's really lovely drive up there. And I highly recommend it.
Yeah, it looks cool.
Do you want to hear about another weird mountain spot?
I do, because I feel like what I was going to follow up that with is totally not as cool. So yes, please do another one.
Okay. Here's one that's that I've never been to. It sounds really neat. I grew up hearing about it and I would love to visit it someday. It also sounds like maybe there are some issues with it. And that is the Ruby City Museum in Franklin, North Carolina. It's home to, it's free museum. It's behind a larger gemstone and precious gems business. And that is the family business of the guy who started this museum. Originally, the family that owns the museum had a motel in Franklin, North Carolina, and they set up a display of precious gems in the lobby as just kind of a gimmick to draw people in.
It's neat. People like gems.
Yeah, it was very popular. And the guy who started it became sort of, by his own family's description, obsessed with big gemstones, and so started the Ruby City Museum. These days, his grandson runs it, and it's a real passion project. Like, the family still owns this business selling precious gems, but they also maintain this museum as a free thing that people can just go to and look at. They have, for instance, an 835-pound amethyst. They have a 385-pound sapphire on display. They have the world's second largest ruby, and I love the fact that it's the world's second largest ruby. And they also weirdly have a whole bunch of pre-Columbian artifacts that nobody is totally sure where they came from, because it's a private collection that somebody bought the family, and like nothing was labeled, and there wasn't any documentation on where it came from. And so that part's a little iffy, if you ask me. They used to display one of my favorite weird, I'm going to modify what I just said. They used to display a set of fake artifacts that had been promoted as proving Mormon beliefs of Jesus having visited indigenous people in the North and South America. Indigenous people in North and South America. But eventually those were debunked as being fake artifacts. And so they removed those from the display. but they have a ton of stuff that's supposed to be pre-Columbian artifacts. And they themselves say, we would love it if experts would tell us what this is because we don't really know.
I think there should be a debunked artifacts museum.
Oh, that would be amazing.
Right?
Yeah.
That would be a fun roadside attraction. And
Yeah.
just be like, here's some stuff that we haven't validated yet. And here's some stuff that absolutely is fake. Kind of like Ripley's does that a little bit. Like they have some old P.T. Barnum stuff where they're like, and then they glued this onto that.
Yeah.
You know, and are transparent about it. But I think that would be cool.
Yeah.
Gems are one of those things that I think it's just in our nature to like want to look at them.
Yeah.
Because they're neat. I'll do 2 quick ones. So
Sure.
I have never been to this place, the Cryptid Museum of North Carolina in Littleton, North Carolina. We've mentioned this before. Just want to give them a little bit of support. If you are in the area of Littleton, North Carolina on a road trip, pop off and check out the Cryptid Museum. We don't know them. This is not a paid placement. I've never been there. It just looks kind of neat.
Yeah.
And then also something that I want to mention because I just think it's fun. And it's one of several of these types of things throughout the state of North Carolina, because North Carolina is still known in some circles for its furniture, but the industry used to be a lot bigger. The Big Chair in Thomasville. You know about the Big Chair?
I have heard about the Big Chair, but I've never seen it. And I've driven past Thomasville a million times.
Yeah, you really got to go into the town to find it. The Big Chair, it is a large-scale replica of a Duncan Fife armchair built in 1950. There was a previous Big Chair that was built in 1922. So there's actually been 2 big chairs. It's a tradition.
That's great. I think that's wonderful. That's fantastic.
The old chair, the original chair was actually made out of pine, you know, and sat outside.
Yeah. Huh.
So that's why the first chair's gone.
Well, there you go.
Because that's what happens to wood if you leave it outside for a long time. The current chair is 30 feet tall, and the seat is over 10 feet wide and is made from steel and concrete.
I guess that'll last.
Lyndon B. Johnson once stood on the chair.
Wow. He was an interesting guy. He was very down to earth in a lot of ways.
I get a kick out of LBJ. We've talked about this. He had a Fresca button. Like he had buttons installed to tell people outside of the Oval Office what to bring him. One of which was a Fresca button.
Wow. I mean, if I could have, Fresca's fine, but if I could have a Diet Cheerwine button, I think I probably would.
Sure, why not?
Yeah.
So anyway, LBJ, there you go. Stood on the chair, liked Fresca.
I wonder if he had a Fresca on the chair.
You know, that would be a real sight. Although it was likely a campaign stunt, so I think he would probably be drinking Cheerwine.
Well, yeah, probably.
So at least a Pepsi.
Yeah, something.
That's pretty much all I had for this. This was meant to be sort of a quick, fun, weird stuff you might see by the side of the road that doesn't necessarily need its own full episode.
Yeah.
What else do you have?
I have one more quick thing, which is the Scottish Tartans Museum in Franklin, North Carolina. A lot of my stuff is up in that part of the mountains because that's a place that, for reasons, my family would go to for a day, a couple of times a year as I was a child. So the Scottish Tartans Museum in Franklin, North Carolina, it's open. It's scottishtartansmuseum.org. And
we've got mini colors. I can't do it.
It's okay. That's Scottish is not your specialty.
I'm trying. Scotch, on the other hand.
There we go. There we go. It's 86 East Main Street in Franklin, North Carolina, which is just off US 64. And I think it's really fascinating. Their website, scottishtartansmuseum.org, has a search engine where you can find out, like, what's your tartan and see an example and hear
green tartans, red tartans, blue tartans, purple tartans, black tartans, yellow tartans. I
mean, they do have by color. It's a really funny little...
Come on down.
It's like an old storefront in downtown Franklin, and I just think that's really neat.
No, that is really neat. I joke, but that is very, very neat.
Yeah, there's a lot of like Scottish and Scotch-Irish heritage up in the mountains, and that's
Totally.
very much part of Appalachian character. And I think that I'm really interested to go there someday.
I would like to do that as well. Although doing a Scottish accent is not one of my specialties. I do enjoy Scotch, and 23andMe has confirmed the family lore that there's at least a drop of Scottish, a drop of Scotch in the Scotch Irish.
So yeah, that's what I've got.
Sweet. Well, thank you so much for joining us today on Road Trippin', a kind of weird episode of Arcane Carolinas.
A whole bunch of stuff that doesn't get its own episode.
Yeah. Go ahead and send us a message with your favorite road trip or roadside attraction type things. And, if we get enough, we'll do a follow-up.
Yeah, totally. Gosh, that'd be amazing. Yeah. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to Arcane Carolinas. Thanks for joining us. If you liked it, give us a rating, leave a comment. If you didn't like it, send us an email and tell us why. If you're not wrong, we'll try to fix it.
And if you're interested in award-winning speculative fiction, including science fiction, urban fantasy, and horror, find me, Michael G. Williams, at www.michaelgwilliamsbooks.com and check out Falstaff Books at falstaffbooks.com.
If you'd like to pick up some Arcane Carolinas merch, look at behind-the-scenes info, pictures, videos, stuff like that, all the things that get cut, check out arcanecarolinas.com, where you can get access to our Patreon, our Facebook, our Twitter, our Instagram, all that in one place, including the merch store. Buy a shirt.
Clothe your body.
Drape your body in our wares.
Be our living billboards.